Hello everybody, welcome into another lesson. So today we are going to factor quadratic equations in the form of ax² + bx+c, where the constant c is positive. They're probably the easiest type to factor. So all quadratic equations, which are to the second power, the highest powers of the second power, you have a constant, you have a coefficient of a on the x² term, then you have a coefficient of b on the linear term, the x term, and then you have a constant of c. So whenever a quadratic equation is referred to in this form, that's the general form of a quadratic equation. There's ax² + bx+c. This will come in handy later when we apply the quadratic formula to solving quadratic equations, especially the ones we can't factor. So let me do some examples here. Let's say we have a quadratic equation of x² + 5x + 4. Okay? You have x² + 5x + 4. So what you have to do, start with your coefficient of x². The coefficient's 1, and for today's lesson and even tomorrow's lesson, the coefficient's going to be 1. So that's going to make our life a lot easier. If your coefficient's 1, then factoring makes it's going to be so much easier to do. So what you have to do now is take your factors of the constant term, that 4. So we take factors of 4. So what are factors of 4? 1 and 4. And then we take, what else? 2 and 2. Those are also factors of 4. Now, what you have to do is you need to find the sum of those factors that will give you the middle term. That'll give you the middle coefficient. So you add the sum of 1 + 4, you get 5. Add the sum of 2 + 2, you get 4. So the factors we want are 1 and 4. Okay? What you're going to do now, since your coefficient's 1 for your x² term, you're just going to take x. Then you have your factors of 1 and 4 that add up to 5, so you'll have x + 1 times the quantity of x + 4. So once you've added your factors of the constant term and figured out what it's going to take to get the coefficient on the middle term, you're going to take x + 1 factor, that quantity, times x plus the second factor. And if you FOIL this out, which we'll do real quick, you get x times x is x², plus x times 4, which is 4x, plus 1 times x, which is just x, plus 1 times 4, which is 4. That would give you x² plus 5x plus 4. You should get your original quadratic equation back when you go ahead and FOIL out your factors. So the factors of x² plus 5x plus 4 are going to be the quantity of x plus 1 times the quantity of x plus 4. And I got more examples here. Let's see. It helps to make yourself a little table like I have here for the factors of the number and then the sum of the factors. That way you have it to reference. Alright, we got z² plus 9z plus 8. So we got z² plus 9z plus 8. Well, since you have a 1 coefficient on your z² term, your life's easier. All you have to worry about is the coefficient, or the constant term of 8. So let's find factors of 8. Factors of 8, well, we got 1 and 8. And then we have 2 and 4. Now take the sum of the factors. 1 and 8 will give you 9. 2 and 4 will give you 6. Well, we want the sum of the factors that give us the coefficient of 9 for our middle term, for the 9z. Well, it's 1 and 8. 1 and 8 are your factors, so now you're just going to take z plus 1 times the quantity of z plus 8. And if you FOIL this out, you'll get z squared plus 9z plus 8. So the answer you get for your factors are going to be z plus 1 times the quantity of z plus 8. Alright, what's next? We have r squared minus 6r plus 8. Alright, so we got r squared minus 6r plus 8. Well, we have a minus term in the middle. So it's still going to kind of work the same. Since your coefficient on the r squared term is 1, you don't worry about that. In a couple lessons, we'll talk about what to do if your coefficient's anything other than 1. It gets a little bit harder then, but we just worry about our coefficient of 8. So what are factors of 8 that'll give you, when you add them together, will give you negative 6? Well, you have negative 1 and negative 8. We want some negative factors. Then you have negative 2 and negative 4. Well, if you add negative 1 and negative 8 together, you get negative 9. You add negative 2 and negative 4 together, you get negative 6. You want to find the factors that'll give you that middle term of negative 6. It looks like it's going to be negative 2 and negative 4. So what you're going to do is take your r minus your 2 times the quantity of r minus 4. And if you FOILed this out, you would in fact get r squared minus 6r plus 8. So you'll get the quantity of r minus 2 times the quantity of r minus 4. So if your middle term's negative, you just want to take the negative factors of your constant term to get such. That's all you'll want to do. All right. We got c squared minus 10c plus 16. So we got c squared minus 10c plus 16. Well, coefficient on your c squared is 1, makes your life easy. We want to find factors of 16 though. That'll give you the middle term of negative 10. Since your sign in the middle term is negative, that means you're going to need to take negative factors of 16. So you would get factors of 16 that are negative would be negative 1, negative 16. What else? You would get negative 2, negative 8. Then you would get negative 4, negative 4. Well, if you add the factors together, negative 1 and negative 16, you would get negative 17. If you add negative 2 and negative 8 together, you get negative 10. If you add negative 4 and negative 4 together, you get negative 8. So we want to find the factors that give us a middle term of negative 10. It looks like negative 2 and negative 8. So now you're just going to take your c minus your 2 times the quantity of c minus 8. And that's the answer you should get for your factors of this. You would get the quantity of c minus 2 times the quantity of c minus 8. Alright, y squared minus 9y plus 14. So we got y squared minus 9y plus 14. Well, coefficient on the y squared term is 1, so your life's a lot easier. We want to find factors of 14 that when added together will give you the constant of negative 9 on the middle term, on your y to the first term. So what are some negative factors of 14? You'll get, of course, negative 1 and negative 14. Then you have negative 2 and negative 7, and that's really all you have. So now let's add the factors. Negative 1 plus negative 14, that'll give you negative 15. Negative 2 plus negative 7, that'll give you negative 9. You're looking for the factors that'll give you the constant, the coefficient of negative 9 on your y to the first term. Well, that'd be negative 2 and negative 7. So now all you have to do is take y minus 2, that quantity, times y minus 7. And you'll get the quantity of y minus 2 times the quantity of y minus 7 for your answer. Alright. P squared minus 14p plus 13. So we got p squared minus 14p plus 13. Well, the coefficient on your p squared is 1, so your life's easy. Now you need to worry about factors of 13 that when added together will give you the sum of negative 14 for your coefficient on the p to the first term. So factors of 13 that are negative, since the middle sign's negative, well, that'd be negative 1 and negative 13. And there would be no other factors of 13 since it's a prime number. So you add negative 1 and negative 13 together, you get negative 14. And in fact, that's the coefficient of the middle term. So your factors of negative 1 and negative 13 check out. You'll end up doing p minus 1, that quantity, times p minus 13. And that's the answer you would get for your factors of p squared minus 14p plus 13. Alright, we got q squared plus 16q plus 15. Alright, so the coefficient on your q squared term is 1, so your life's going to be easy. You have a positive term in the middle, so you want to find positive factors of 15 that when added together will give you 16 for your coefficient of the q to the first term. So factors of 15, of course you have 1 and 15. The only other factors that we know are 3 and 5. Alright, well, 1 and 15, when you add those factors together, you get 16. 3 and 5, when you add those factors together, you get 8. So we want to find the factors that when added together give us the middle coefficient of 16 on the q to the first term. Well, that happens to be 1 and 15. When added together, those give us 16. So you're going to take the quantity of Q plus 1 times the quantity of Q plus 15. So the answer you should get for your factors of this quadratic equation would be the quantity of Q plus 1 times the quantity of Q plus 15. So if your middle term is negative, you find negative factors of the constant. If your positive term, if your middle term is positive, you find positive factors of the constant that add up to the coefficient of the middle term. So that's where we're at so far. Now, let's move on to something different. Let's say we had p squared plus 19 PQ plus 34 Q squared. Well, all of a sudden we got two variables. Well, that's okay. It's going to work much the same way. Because what you have to do, your constant on the p squared is still 1, so your life's easy there. You have a middle term that's positive. Your middle term is positive, so you're going to have find positive factors of 34 Q squared. Alright, we need to find positive factors of 34Q squared. Well, you're going to have definitely, let's see, what would you have? Factors of 34Q squared. You would have Q and 34Q. What else would you have? You'd have 2Q and 17Q, and I think that's all there is. So basically, whenever you have a second variable, you take the square root of the Q squared, which would be Q, you put that on each of your factors. You would put the square root of the variable on the second term on each of your factors. Now, which of these factors, when added together, gives you the middle term, middle constant of 19? Well, does Q plus 34Q equal 35Q? No. I mean, does it equals 35Q, but it doesn't give you the 19Q. How about 2Q and 17Q? That'll give you your 19Q. The reason I say that, 2Q and 17Q give you your middle constant of 19, then you have the Q. What you're going to do now is you're going to take your P term, take P plus that quantity of 2Q times the quantity of P plus 17Q. And then if you do FOIL, which we'll do real quick, P times P is P squared plus, you'll get P times 17Q, which would give you 17PQ, plus 2Q times P, which would give you 2PQ, plus 2Q times 17Q, which would give you 34Q squared. Simplify this, you would get P squared plus 19PQ plus 34Q squared, which would give you your original quadratic equation right back. That's the goal. That's how you can check your work and see if you factored it correctly. So it's a little different when you have two variables. You're still going to add the coefficients of your third term together, but you're going to have the square root of the variable on the third term attached to it. That's all it is. So we'll illustrate with another example here. We got a squared plus 10ab plus 24b squared. Alright, so we got a squared plus 10ab plus 24b squared. Well, your coefficient on the a squared is 1, so your life just got easier there. Now you need to find your factors of 24b squared, that when the sum of the factors of your coefficient will equal 10. So factors of 24b squared. You're always taking the square root of the b squared for your factors. You would get b. So factors of 24b squared would be b and 24b. What else would you get? You get 2b, 12b. You would get 3b and 8b. Then you would get 4b and 6b. Alright, because when you multiply these factors, you would get 24b squared. Now if you add these factors, let's see, add the coefficient of b and 24b, you'll get 25b. Let's see, how about 2b and 12b? You get 14b. How about 3b and 8b? Well, you get 11b. 4b and 6b, you get 10b. Which of the factors added together at least gives you the middle coefficient of 10? That's going to be your 4b and 6b. So you're going to take, of course, the quantity of a plus 4b times the quantity of a plus 6b. And that should be the answer you get. That would be the answer you get for your factors of a squared plus 10ab plus 24b squared. You'll get a plus 4b times the quantity of a plus 6b. Alright. We have c squared minus 16cd plus 48d squared. So, wrong marker. I want to extend this line a little bit here. Alright. So we got c squared minus 16cd plus 48d squared. Well, good news is the coefficient on the c squared is 1. So we can deal right with the coefficient of the third term. We need the coefficients of the third term that equal, that when added together, the factors of that coefficient added together equal negative 16. Which means you're going to have to find negative factors of 48 to accomplish that. So we need to find factors of 48d squared, which are negative, that when added together, add up to negative 16 for the coefficient of the negative 16 CD term. So 48, well, let's see, 48d squared, you get negative d, negative 48d. What else? You'll get negative 2d, negative 24d. Then what else would you get? You get negative 3d, negative 16d, negative 4d, negative 12d, and you got negative 6d, negative 8d. Alright, so when we add these together, negative d plus negative 48d gives you negative 49d. Well, it gives you a coefficient of negative 49. We need negative 16, so negative d and negative 48d aren't going to work. You have negative 2d and negative 24d. When you add those together, you get negative 26d. Well, you have a coefficient of negative 26. What you need is negative 16. So negative 2d and negative 24d aren't going to work. How about negative 3d and negative 16d? You would get negative 19d. Well, this gives you a coefficient of negative 19. You need negative 16. Not going to work. How about negative 4d and negative 12d? Well, that gives you negative 16d. And you need your coefficient of negative 16, which you have here. So we can stop there. So you'll take your factors of c minus the 4d, that quantity times c minus the 12d. So the answer you should get for this would be the quantity of c minus 4d times the quantity of c minus 12d. What's next here? We got x squared minus 15xy plus 72y squared. Alright, so we got x squared minus 15xy plus 72y squared. Well, the coefficient on the x squared is 1, so that makes your life easy. Now you need to find, of course, the factors of 72 that when added together give you negative 15. That means you need to have negative factors of 72. So we'll take factors of 72y squared. So since you have y squared, you just take the square root of that. You'll have a y tagging onto each term. So negative factors of 72 would be, well, negative 1 and negative 72. What else? Negative 2 and negative 36. That should be negative y, negative 72y, negative 2y, negative 36y. Okay. How about, let's see, negative 3y, negative 24y, negative 4y, negative 18y, negative 6y, negative 12y, then negative 8y, negative 9y. Alright, so let's add up the factors here, see if we get our middle term of negative 15. Well, negative 1 and negative 72 gives you negative 73. Then you just have the y hanging out. Well, negative 73 is clearly not negative 15. How about negative 2 and negative 36? That would give you negative 38. Then you just have the y. Well, negative 38 is clearly not negative 15. How about negative 3 and negative 24? Well, that would give you negative 27. Then you just have the y hanging out. Negative 27 is clearly not negative 15. Negative 4 and negative 18, that would give you negative 22y. Well, negative 22 is also not negative 15. Negative 6y and negative 12y, that would give you negative 18y. Well, negative 18 is clearly not negative 15. And then negative 8y and negative 9y, that gives you negative 17y. Negative 17 is also not negative 15. Well, we've run out of factors. So, if something is not factorable, it's called prime. You think of a prime number, right? The only factors of a prime number are 1 in itself. It won't factor any further. The same can be said for polynomials. This is called a prime polynomial, meaning it's not factorable. This is a prime, you could just say prime, but this is a prime polynomial. You can't factor this any further. So sometimes you'll get that, or try as you might, you can't factor it. Which, when we go to solve quadratic equations, it'll especially be useful to know the quadratic formula when we go to solve them, because that'd be the only way to solve them. But we won't learn the quadratic formula for quite a bit yet. That's quite a while down the road. We'll learn it in this course, but just not right now. Alright, let's do 3 more. We'll do another similar one. Let's see, we got x squared minus 16xy plus 45y squared. So we got x squared minus 16xy plus 45y squared. Well, coefficient of x squared is 1, so that makes your life easy. Now you got to find factors of the coefficient 45 that, when added together, give you the coefficient of negative 16 in the middle term. So we'll find factors of 45y squared. So factors, let's see, of course you're going to take the square root of y squared. We'll deal with that in a second, but what are factors of 45 that are negative? You got negative 1 and 45, so the y just tags along. You'll get negative y, negative 45y. You add negative y, negative 45y together, you get negative 46y. Well, the coefficient of negative 46 is definitely not negative 16. We can forget that. What else? We got negative 3y and negative 15y. Well, negative 3y, negative 15y, that gives you negative 18y. Well, that coefficient of negative 18 does not equal negative 16, so that's not going to work. Then we got negative 5y and negative 9y. Well, negative 5y, negative 9y, that'll give you negative 14y. Negative 14 is definitely not negative 16, so this is another prime polynomial. We cannot factor it. This is a prime polynomial. I got 2 more examples, then we'll be done for the day. Alright. Got m squared plus 20mn plus 51n squared. Alright, so we got m squared plus 20mn plus 51n squared. Well, coefficient on the m squared term is 1, so your life's going to be easier than it would be if it wasn't. Now we need to find factors of the coefficient of 51 that when added together equal the coefficient of 20 in the middle term. So factors of 51 n squared. Well, factors of 51, positive factors, you'll get 1, the n tags along, so you just get n and 51n. When added together, n and 51n give you 52n. Well, clearly that 52 is not 20, so that doesn't work. The only other ones I know of are going to be 3n and 17n. When added together, 3n and 17n give you 20n. Well, 20 is what we need. We need that coefficient of 20, and the factors of 3n and 17n have given that to us. So you'll take m plus your 3n times your quantity of m plus your 17n. And if you FOILed this out, you would get the original polynomial back. You'll end up getting the quantity of m plus 3n times the quantity of m plus 17n. And I do have one more problem. Alright, got a squared minus 12ab plus 27b squared. So we got a squared minus 12ab plus 27b squared. Well, your coefficient on the a squared term's 1, so that makes life a lot better. Now you have to find factors of the coefficient of 27 that will give you a coefficient of negative 12. So that means we need to find negative factors of 27, and actually 27b squared. So negative factors of 27, well, that'd be negative 1, which you tag along the b, so you get negative b, and then negative 27b. Add those together, you get negative 28b. Well, negative 28 is definitely not negative 12. That doesn't work. The only other factors would be negative 3b, negative 9b, which when you add negative 3b and negative 9b together, you would get negative 12b. So negative 12 does match up with our coefficient that we need in the middle of negative 12. So therefore we have our factors. We have a minus that 3b times the quantity of a minus 9b. So this would factor into the quantity of a minus 3b times the quantity of a minus 9b. So that's been it for this lesson. So the next lesson, we are going to do a similar thing, only it's still going to be in the form of ax²+bx+c like we did today. But instead of the c term, the constant term being positive, it's going to be negative for the next lesson. So I hope everyone has a good day. Take care.